George of the jungle, strong as he can be. Watch out for that tree. Watch out for that tree. George of the jungle, friend to you and me.
Hey guys, YouTuber100 here. Alright, and now here I am to continue these reviews or my picks for the top 10 best live-action Disney movies. As I told you guys in my last video, I did have a two-way tie for the number 10 spot. Alright, and now here's my review for my other spot in the number 10, which, as you just heard, is for George of the Jungle. Yeah, so of course, like, that's just one of the catchiest theme songs ever. I mean, it'll be stuck in your head forever. It's been stuck in mine for all these years, and I'm sure, like, it's been stuck in, like, everyone else's. Like, Nostalgia could even said in his December review, like, that song will just never leave your head. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, this is actually, like, a pretty good movie right here. I mean, I really did love this movie as a kid, and even now I still do enjoy it. I mean, it's just a really, like, it's a really hilarious movie, and yeah. It's just like a really enjoyable movie to watch, especially like for kids, and even like as adults, you can still really enjoy this movie. I know I really did when I love it as a kid, like I told you, and even now, like I said, I mean, I still really do enjoy watching this movie. I mean, it's just a pretty good, enjoyable movie. Now, of course, this film was like based on like the old cartoon from like, was it the 1960s? And yeah, we all know that live-action movies based on classic cartoons really have a reputation of being pretty terrible. I mean, yeah, just, you can go through the list of how many live-action movies based on cartoons really have sucked. I mean, there's stuff like Scooby-Doo, The Flintstones, owns like Garfield, Last Airbender, or, I mean, yeah, you can just, like, it goes on and on of how many movies based on, like, live-action movies based on, like, classic cartoons can really suck. But at least we do have this one, which actually is probably the only type of these kinds of films that actually is a good film. I mean, yeah, this movie, it's good. And I'm glad to see, like, there are, like, a lot of critics that really are, like, positive towards this film. Like, Siskel and Ebert both gave the film a thumbs up, as you can see right here. Like, Siskel and Ebert, 2 thumbs up. So, yeah, it's good to see, like, they're positive on it, and like even in Nostalgia Critic's December review for this movie, he was overall positive about this movie. Yeah, so I am glad to see that there are like critics that are like more positive on this movie, because yeah, this movie really does deserve it. I mean, it is like a really good, entertaining, enjoyable movie. I mean, yeah, of course, like it does have a bunch of fourth wall jokes. It's basically like, I kind of think of this movie as kind of like Deadpool for kids in a way, because it's just like a bunch of fourth wall breaking. I mean, there's like a bunch of things like arguing with narrator and stuff, and just like the narrator interjecting at points. Yeah, just like a lot of jokes with the narrator and stuff. And yeah, of course, like in this film, you have like people like Brendan Fraser as George, Leslie Mann as Ursula, Thomas Hayden Church as Lyle, has like John Cleese as the voice of Ape. So, yeah, it does have a pretty good cast for this film, and yeah, they all do really good. I mean, they're all, of course, like, all really goofy in this film. And yeah, it is really enjoyable to watch all of them, like, acting the way they do. I mean, it's just, like, really entertaining to watch. And, of course, like, George, of course, is kind of like a Tarzan parody in a way, or a Tarzan spoof, yeah. He pretty much comes from the same line of story or like backstory that Tarzan did, how he was kind of like just like left orphan or something in a jungle, and yeah, of course that like he grew up in the jungle and now he's like basically the king of the jungle. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's really like a really kind of silly, goofy parody of Tarzan. And yeah, it's like I said, this is a really enjoyable movie. Yeah, I would probably give this once again a solid 3 stars out of 4, just like Air Bud. I mean, yeah, just, it is really like an enjoyable movie. I mean, yeah, you can watch it as kids and you'll love it, and even when you watch it later on as adults, I think you will enjoy this movie a lot. It's just like a really enjoyable movie to sit through, as long as you can really understand what kind of movie this is really being. I mean, yeah, if you can understand that, you'll probably enjoy this. Alright, so, yeah, let me just get right into the review. Right, so the movie opens up with kind of like an animated opening, kind of like telling the story about where they are, because yeah, the narrator explains like this movie is like set in a place in Africa known as the Bakubu, and it shows like a plane passing by, and apparently like it like ends up like crashing through a couple of hidden mountains, and the wings end up like breaking off of the plane, and there's some cargo that goes loose, including like a little baby boy George. And then yeah, like during the opening credits, like it does play like the George of the Jungle theme song, and Disney kind of like made their own version. It wasn't like the version that I just played at the beginning of this video. It was a different one, different version of the song, and yeah. And yeah, basically, like, had the exact same lyrics as the known theme song, yeah. And then, eventually, then it cuts to live action, where George is now grown up, and yeah, of course, like, if you know George of the Jungle, you know that he has a habit of always crashing into trees as he's swinging through vines and stuff, yeah. And apparently, like, there are, like, tourists of the jungle, which, of course, is Ursula, and she also has, like, a Ugandan tour guide Kwame, and of course like some porters that like carry around their luggage and stuff, you know, which are like Kip, Ndugo, and Balito. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing the names wrong, yeah. And eventually Ursula then sees that her fiance Lyle was able to track her down with the help of two other tracker poachers, Max and Thor. Yeah. Yeah. And Lyle tried to like bring Ursula back home with him, but like he had bad reception on his phone. But Ursula wanted to stay because they were gonna climb up the ape mountain the next day to see some of the apes. Yeah. And then like they were starting to like Max was starting to talk about like the legend of the supposed white ape that is on the mountain. And then Kwame was like kind of explaining the legend of the white ape, saying how he's basically like a really vicious creature or something. Yeah. And then yeah. And then then the next day, like Lyle agreed to go with Ursula to up the mountain, and then they finally did approach the ape mountain in that day, and of course, like the mountain looked like an ape's head, and then the narrator was like saying that everybody reacted with awe, and everyone literally like went aw, and then the narrator just like said that he said aw, which was like AWE, and then everyone changed their reaction to ooh. And as they were like trying to cross a bridge, Lyle was like shaking the bridge, trying to show that it was like a real steady bridge, and then one of the porters ended up falling off the bridge. But yeah, he ended up surviving, but he was really bandaged up. And then and like Lyle was trying to make peace with the porters, and then at one point like he was like giving them like cigars and stuff, and also like his camera. And then like one of the porters was saying like in the Swahili language that he was like had like the Lyle's camera lens was dirty, but he had the equipment to clean it. And Lyle also handed him his lighter, which was like a gun type of lighter. It was like resembled a gun, like it looked like a gun, but it was really a lighter. Yeah. And he gave him like his lighter to clean that also. And then Lyle just finally like dragged Ursula out in the jungle to find the white ape so they could just leave. And then they eventually like were ambushed by a lion, and Lyle like tried to flee, but he ended up like tripping and getting knocked out. And then as Ursula like was cornered by the lion, then George showed up and he swung to save Ursula. And yeah, of course like George was really the white ape that has everyone's heard about and stuff, yeah. And then yeah, George was like fighting with the lion. It was kind of like a silly fight, and then at one point like George like bounced off a tree and gave the lion a clothesline, which was like the tree was like rubber. And then at one point George just like lifted up the lion and just like spin it around like really really fast, and even did like with one arm and stuff, yeah. Then eventually George then just like swung Ursula away from the lion, yeah. And like George like ended up like crashing into a tree branch, but Ursula got the effect of the crash, yeah. And then Yeah, George then just like took Ursula back to his treehouse, and Lyle was just like starting to regain consciousness as he saw like George carrying Ursula away. Like Lyle just went back to like Kwame and the porters and the people, and he was just like trying to tell them that he was like being really heroic and stuff. Yeah, he was just trying to assume like heroic actions and stuff, even though like he didn't do anything. Yeah. And then back at George's treehouse, Ursula like met George's brother Abe, who of course was able to speak, and like Ursula really couldn't believe what she was seeing, and like she just kept passing out, and yeah, she really like wasn't didn't seem to really like Abe talking very much. Yeah. And then later on, like Ursula asked George to help her find Lyle again. And then George called his pet dog, who was really an elephant named Shep. Yeah. And yeah, Shep just had really like acted like a dog all the time. Basically, like he thought he was a dog and stuff. Yeah. And as they went out searching for Lyle on Shep, they also they also met like George's toucan friend Tukey, and brought them to like a monkey who apparently like was being made fun of by other monkeys and not letting him play with them. And then George like set up a thing for to make the monkey seem heroic. The monkey went over to all the other monkeys, and then the lion showed up again. It made it seem like the monkey like ended up like scaring the lion off, and then the others allowed him in with them. Yeah, and then it just showed like George was and Ursula were becoming closer with each other. Like George was teaching Ursula how to swing. And then later on, George just asked Ape to try to help him win over Ursula. And yeah, Ape was just like teaching George how apes really would win over or women. Yeah, and then yeah, George later on like tried to do some of that stuff in front of Ursula to get her won over, but yeah, of course like it didn't work. And then later on, like Ursula and George were just talking again. George like showed that he kind of had a good luck charm, which was like a crocodile tooth he kept wrapped around his neck, and Ursula kind of had like a ring she found in a cereal box. Yeah, stuff, yeah. And then there was like it was like time to dance, and Ursula didn't want to dance at first because she felt that she would be embarrassed, but then George convinced her that there wasn't anything for her to be embarrassed about because there were no other people around, and then that then convinced Ursula to dance with George. And yeah, the song during this dance is really good, like Della by Johnny Clegg. It's a really good song, and it's really catchy. Yeah. And then the next day, like Lyle just was like really like had just about enough of everything, and then like he just ended up being so angry that he just like tripped face first into a pile of elephant crap. And then like the porters were just laughing at it, which was hilarious, like saying like the bad guy falls and poop stuff. Yeah. And then Lyle asked for his lighter back, and then like they gave him what was supposedly the lighter because he there were like two different types of the things, the gun looking things. Yeah. And then Lyle could actually hear Ursula in the distance, and then like Lyle, Max, and Thor ended up like going to look for Ursula, and then they eventually ended up discovering George, and that George was the white ape. And Lyle like stepped in to try to recover Ursula, and then he was just saying that he would scare George off with his lighter if George got aggressive. And then yeah, Lyle of course like found Ursula and tried to get her to go back with him, and then while he was doing that, Max and Thor also discovered Shep, and they saw that Shep actually had some ivory with him, and then they were getting ready to shoot Shep, but then Ape jumped down and was just yelling at Shep to run. And after they saw that Ape could speak, then they were just decided to try to tranquilize Ape and bring him back with them to make money. And then George saw that, and he was trying to rush over to stop them from shooting Ape, and then Lyle like had the lighter pointed at George, and then Lyle eventually pulled the trigger, and then it ended up like accidentally shooting George. It turned out Lyle actually had a real gun. Yeah. Well, then Ursula then just flew George back home with her to get him some medical treatment, and it also showed that Lyle had actually been arrested in the African jail. Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, it just showed then, like, Max and Thor were, like, heading back to the mountain to try to catch Ape again. And then, like, George was just, like, trying to adapt to San Francisco, which is Ursula's home. And it just showed, like, he was sleeping on Ursula's balcony, and then, like, Ursula tried to turn to her friend Betsy for some advice, because, yeah, she just didn't know how she would be able to really tell her parents what happened to Lyle, and now that George is with her. But, yeah, Betsy just convinced Ursula that she should just tell the truth to her parents. And it also showed that Ursula went out with George to get him some clothes and stuff, yeah. And then, like, Ursula's mother then saw Ursula walking with George, and then, like, later on, she, like, tried to call Ursula to talk to her about that, but then, like, she just, like, got Ursula's answering machine, and she was just, like, telling Ursula to pick up the phone, then just showed then George picking up the phone and just screaming the Tarzan yell, really loud into the phone and stuff, yeah. Then Ursula went to, like, her work to try to explain things to her father, and then apparently, like, they had a surprise party for her and Lyle and stuff, yeah. And then as George was staying at Ursula's home, he was like watching a weather broadcast, and the weatherman was just saying that it was absolutely gorgeous weather and everybody should be outside. So then George just ended up going out into the city, and then George eventually came across the Bay Bridge, and then George climbed to the top of the bridge, and then it showed that there was like a parasailer. Apparently, like, he was like stuck in the bridge because his parachute had been like tangled up into the bridge. So then George had found a rope at the top of the bridge and then just swang down to save the parasailer. And apparently that was also on the news. And then Ursula ended up rushing to the scene, and then she ended up like boarding the rescue boat for the parasailer. And then, yeah, George ended up saving the parasailer, but then like George ended up like getting caught in the canopy, and then George ended up like sailing over the bay, and then he eventually ended up like falling onto the boat and stuff. And then Ursula's mother once again saw Ursula and George together on the news. Yeah. And then, like, in the jungle, eventually Max and Thor ended up like tranquilizing Thor, and then they ended up like kidnapping him and then taking him off to Vegas and stuff. Yeah, they just were traveling through the jungle with Ape. Yeah, and then Ape just like sent Tukey off to go find George. Yeah. And eventually, then Ursula was just explaining to her parents what happened in the jungle with Lyle and George, and she was just telling her parents that she didn't want to marry Lyle anymore, and her father was understanding, but her mother just really objected to it and stuff. Yeah, and then later on that night at like the engagement party, Ursula's mother was just then talking to George. At first, she was like trying to be smooth with him, trying to say that he should give up Ursula for her sake. But then she was like starting to become bitter about it, and she was just like forbidding George from doing anything to mess up Ursula's marriage to Lyle, or else, in her words, she would remove his reason for wearing a loincloth, and you can probably guess what that really means. And then later that night, Tukey then arrived and then just told George what happened to Ape. And then George, of course, like, knew he had to save Ape. So then George ended up leaving, but before he did, he placed the crocodile tooth in Ursula's hand while she was sleeping. Then the next day, as like Ursula just saw that George was gone, her mother was just like telling her that George just left because he knows he belongs in the jungle and Ursula belongs there. Yeah, but then like Ursula eventually like caught on that she really got to George and really like basically manipulated him to leave and stuff. Yeah, but then like after her mother like brought up love of about to her, then that made Ursula realize that she really loved George, and then like she ended up just departing and went back to the jungle with her father's blessing, of course. Yeah. And then eventually George arrived back in Africa, and then he raced back to his treehouse with some Air Jordans on. Yeah. And then eventually, like, as Mac, Thor and Max were just like just getting really impatient, Ape then just revealed to them that the trail they're taking is actually a fake trail, and then it actually leads back to the treehouse. Yeah. And then George eventually arrived back at the treehouse, and then he saw what had happened, and basically had the treehouse really just ransacked. Yeah. And shortly after, Max, Thor, and Ape, and then also arrived back at the treehouse. And then eventually Thor was just like arguing with the narrator because the narrator was just like rambling on, and they were just arguing. And the narrator just told Thor he didn't like him and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it just like was a really funny argument. Yeah. Then eventually George then found Max and Thor and was like fighting with them. And then as Max and Thor were like getting the upper hand on George, then Tukey, the monkey, and Shep then like were helping George. Like Tukey was shot into Thor's butt. Yeah. And then Max was like getting pelted with coconuts. And as Max was about to shoot Shep, Ursula then arrived swinging on vines, and then she knocked down Max, and yeah, Abe then like nailed Max head with a coconut, knocking him out. And then eventually George just gave a huge punch to Thor and knocked him out too. And as Ursula was about to tell George that she loved him, then Lyle then arrived, and the narrator was like explaining that Lyle had escaped from the jail, and he joined a cult, and Lyle also told Ursula that he's now like a wedding minister, and Lyle was like gonna try to force Ursula into marriage. And then as George was like trying to stop Lyle, George like ended up like being captured by some mercenaries. And then like as Lyle was like taking Ursula away with him, and then like the other apes then just ended up saving George from the mercenaries. He's unlocking all of them up with Max and Thor. Yeah. And then eventually like Lyle and Ursula ended up in the Ape River for in a boat, and then George of course like gave chase. And then eventually like Lyle and Ursula ended up like caught in a current, and then George just had, in his words, the biggest swing in jungle history, and he was like swinging at really top speed, really. They were eventually caught in the curb, and then George eventually, of course, ended up like crashing into a tree, and it was just a huge crash. I mean, the impact was so hard that bark fell from the other side of the tree, and then the tree just ended up like falling over. But George ended up like rescuing Ursula. But yeah, then like Lyle was in a like went into a dark cave, and he thought that Ursula was still in the boat with him. And then like it didn't show him Lyle like finished the wedding ceremony, but then it showed like Lyle was actually talking with another gorilla, and so like that ended up like getting a marriage and stuff, and yeah. And then after George and Ursula told them that they loved each other, they then married later on in the jungle, yeah. And yeah, we had like a wedding reception and stuff with Dello once again playing, yeah. Then the movie just ended with like it showed that George and Ursula had another son, well, a son rather, yeah. And then it showed like them presenting their new son to the other jungle animals, Lion King style. They were actually at the top of Pride Rock, and George was holding his son up in the air like Rafiki did with Simba. Yeah. And then like as the credits were starting to roll, then Abe just then interjected, and then he revealed that he was now a performer in Las Vegas, and Max and Thor were now like his stuntmen and stuff. And so yeah, it's just like a little bit right there. So yeah, and that's how it ended. So yeah. So yeah, like I said, 3 stars out of 4. I mean, it is a really enjoyable movie. I mean, especially if you're a kid, and yeah, like I said, if you can really like see the type of movie that this is really being, I think you'll find a lot of enjoyment to it. I mean, I know I really did. And yeah, this is, like I said, this is probably like the only good live action film that is based on a cartoon. I mean, yeah, it is like a definitely a really enjoyable movie. So yeah, you should like check this out if you're, and yeah, just yeah, check this out and yeah, just see for yourself of what you think about it. Alright, so yeah, that does it for a review of George of the Jungle. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. So yeah, and yeah, no, none of the other movies that I have in this countdown, like none of the other spots have a two-way tie. So yeah, every other number on this list will just be one movie alone. Alright, so yeah, there will be no more two-way ties in this countdown. Alright, but anyway, alright, so that does it for my review of George of the Jungle. Hope you guys enjoyed this review. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.